Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Eric. Thought I would do a Friday Reads video for April 17th, 2026. And I just have a few books I'll talk about here. So this one I talked about last time on The Proud Tower by Barbara Tuchman, which I finished a couple days ago. I talked about this book last time. It's a portrait of Europe before the First World War. The book is more like a group of essays that focus on political, cultural, artistic trends primarily in England. There's a chapter on Germany. There's a chapter on France. There's a chapter on The Hague. So overall, I liked this book. Some of the essays were really strong. Some of them were kind of dry. I thought her essay on Germany was really good, on Strauss, the composer, and just the whole cultural scene in Germany as it was rising to world power at the start of the 20th century. And but like I said, some of the chapters are a little dry. Others really pop along. So I'll post my full review I left of this book below. But I think one of the tensions in this book is whether the First World War was inevitable, or whether it was not. Whether it could have been avoided somehow. Like in the next book I'm going to talk about, the author suggests that the First World War was not inevitable. In fact, it was a series of choices that led to the catastrophe. Or was there something inevitable? Was Europe going to explode? And I feel like Tuchman, although she doesn't really come out and argue either way, I feel like reading this book you get the sense of there being an inevitability towards war, with the technological shocks happening, the competition between various empires, Germany, France, Russia, France as well, Austro-Hungarian Empire. So yeah, you get that some kind of war was going to happen. But overall, if you want a portrait of Europe before the war to get introduced to some of the main figures, what was happening politically and culturally, I would recommend this book. And then the other book I'm reading is The Sleepwalkers by Christopher Clark. About 100 pages or so into this one. In the preface, this is also about the origins of the First World War. And he is a historian, at Cambridge, So, and in the introduction, he sets out how he is more interested in the how countries went to war in 1914 as opposed to the why question, why they went to war. The historian is trying the best he can to reconstruct how it happened. So, in the early chapters, he spends a lot of time in the Balkans, which I think is good, where we start out with Serbia and we learn about Serbian politics and culture. Then we move into the Austro-Hungarian Empire I'm reading about now, and the tensions within these empires, the tensions going on outside of them. So it's engaging so far. One thing he also pointed out is that it's a difficult question to answer because there's just so many documents, and a lot of countries, the documents that they did release in the years after the war were biased or had agendas and things like that. So it's challenging for historians to reconstruct all of this, since you have so many countries involved, so many languages, so many personalities, that sometimes historians might get caught up in the why of World War One. But like I said, this book is more about how it happened, trying to come to an answer. But so far I'm enjoying it. So I guess another historical themed book. This is a novel. This is a novel by Werner Herzog, the filmmaker, called The Twilight World. And this is about a Japanese soldier. It's based on a true story. Onada, who was a lieutenant stationed on an island in the Philippines, and he was there until the 1970s, surviving, thinking the war was still going on. So this man spent almost 30 years surviving on this island, thinking the war was still going on. So Herzog was in Japan in the 70s, and he was able to meet with Hiru and get his account of what happened. I'm surprised this was never made into a film. It seemed natural for Herzog. I'm sure he planned to make this into a film at some point, but this is a fairly slim book, and yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. So yeah, so that's The Twilight World, Werner Herzog, and then I'm also reading this book, Positively 4th Street. The Lives and Times of Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Mimi Baez Farina, and Richard Farina. So this is a group portrait of 4 figures in the 60s, some of them well-known, some of them not as well-known. I've read this book years ago. I wanted to reread it. I actually saw Bob Dylan perform this past week, last Sunday, so it'd been a while since I've been to a Dylan concert, so it was good to see him performing again. He's almost 85 years old now, but still out there performing. But anyway, this book is in the 60s, and it's about the folk scene of the 60s, and really focused on these 4 people. Joan Baez and Bob Dylan are fairly well known. Mimi was the younger sister of Joan, and she was married to Richard Farina, who is kind of the main figure in this book, who was a contemporary of Dylan's, and some believe that Farina could have been an interesting contrast to Dylan, but Farina died quite young in a motorcycle accident. He was before the age of 30, but he was an interesting personality on the scene. Farina was a novelist. He wrote the novel Been Down So Long, It Looks Like Up to Me. And later he got into music and was really pursuing music before his life ended. So interesting book, yeah, to go back to this one. Also, a character in this book is Thomas Pynchon, who I've talked about, who was a close friend of Richard Farina. They were friends in college, and so Pynchon kind of makes a few appearances in this book. So that's another point of interest with Positively 4th Street. And Bob Dylan in this book, who is, I forget how he's portrayed, whether this is a negative Dylan or a positive Dylan, or what do we get? There's maybe been a renewed interest in Dylan since the movie came out, the Chalamet movie came out a few years ago. And I used to have, I still do. I still have quite a few books on Dylan. A little Dylan library, and but this is a good book to have. I mean, the author is David Hajdu, who did a lot of interviews, did a lot of research, and really puts together really a skillful prose of this group portrait of the era, primarily the early to mid 1960s is the primary time period here. So yeah, so those are 4 books I've been reading over the past week. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, please let me know, and I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.